Hello, hi everyone.
Hello.
Hi Joseph. Good afternoon, colleagues, friends. Hi, Adrian, Magnus. Thank you all for being here today at BAM. This is the last session of a long day full of ideas and reflections. So thanks so much for being here with us. Also all over the globe, thanks. I don't know about you, but I'm sure that everyone really feels like going a little bit into the city after this 2 years of not being here. So we might be wrapping up a little bit early today. Well, welcome to the session, A Value Proposition, Cross-Border Collaboration. Today the reality of climate change, government focus on domestic agenda, travel restrictions, and economic uncertainty have changed the way we collaborate remotely. So how should we move forward to counter the rise of insularity and ensure meaningful cultural exchange? The topic we're addressing this afternoon is, I believe, one of the reasons we're all part of ISPA. It's certainly one of the reasons why we're here or connecting from afar. And it's really part of ISPA's mission, and we're constantly looking how to make it grow bigger and richer. So the past 2 years have transformed the way we internationally collaborate and work, health risks, economic uncertainty, and of course, climate change. So how can we address these issues as we're dealing with them as a community? How should we move forward? And to explore this topic, today we have 3 wonderful panelists. I will give a short intro so that they can tell us more about themselves further on. And I forgot to introduce myself, so I am Jimena Lara. I am part of the Anglo-Mexican Foundation in Mexico City, and I'm very happy and honored to be here with you. So here with us today is Joseph Pupe. He's a musician and performing artist in Zambia. Joseph is also the founding director of Music Inspires Foundation, where he works actively at creating awareness around climate change, social inequalities, and sustainability. And he collaborates with the UN Information Center in Zambia, as well as the Initiative for Communication and Sustainability here at Columbia University in New York. And he is an ISPA fellow. So help me welcome Joseph, please.
Thank you so much, Jimena.
Connecting from Boston is Adrienne Petrillo. Adrienne is the Senior Programming Director at New England Foundation for the Arts, which she's currently Senior Director of New England Presenting and Touring and of Center Stage, the international exchange program that brings ensembles from different countries to tour across the US as part of its cultural diplomacy program with the State Department. In the coming weeks, Adrienne is welcoming 9 different groups from Asia, Latin America, and Europe to tour into the US. Welcome, Adrienne. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And we have from Stockholm, all the way from Sweden, is Magnus Nordberg. Magnus is CEO and founder of Nordberg Movement, a development and production agency for dance and choreography. He collaborates directly with a group of selected artists. He develops projects for the entire sector and also creates festivals and other forums to presenting choreography. Magnus has actually been exploring strategies to find ways to collaborate remotely without traveling as much, but having a lot of collaboration in sustainable ways. So he has great experience to share with us. Thank you, Magnus, and welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to all our panelists. I love, that at ISPA, one never stops learning. Every year, I learn something new. Right. And this year is about moderating a panel from afar. So thank you guys for your patience. Okay, so let's start. As I was saying, as members of ISPA, we want to continue a global collaboration. We want to make sure that we continue doing that. This is one of the reasons we're here. So I guess the main question to all of you would be, what are you thinking right now? From each of your roles and your perspectives, what are you dealing with? Could you reflect a bit on how is this currently affecting your work, the work that you're doing, what you're actively trying to solve? If you can share with us, how is it going for you? Who would like to go first? Okay.
Well,
Joseph, you're here.
I'm here. Let me start first. Good. So obviously, we've all been hard hit by the pandemic, right? From all corners of the world, the developed and the developing world, and we are faced with the similar challenges, and it calls for collective solutions. I, for one, have been greatly affected by the pandemic, being an artist, and with our work also on to the community. So it made me feel so vulnerable and disconnected, but at the same time felt so connected thanks to technology. And during the quarantine, the isolation, my imaginations went wild. But at the same time, it was a great moment of reflection and inflection on what the future would look like if we were to live in the post-pandemic, you know. So I learned from all of these, from that experience, including a little bit of now, that we are so incredibly interconnected and interdependent as humans. And all of us here have traveled from all corners of the world just to be here. And this really symbolizes the core values of collaboration, but at the same time, international touring. Yeah.
Yes, vulnerability and thinking about the future, right? And
Yes.
from the artist's perspective, that also fosters creativity.
Exactly, exactly.
Thanks, Joseph. Would anyone else, Magnus, perhaps? Would like to
Yeah, I think what's on my mind is to really keep track of where artists are in their thinking and in their development of their work. I think the pandemic has really hit hard on new works, development of new works, and the possibility to disseminate them and meet an audience. And I still believe in those core values that was before the pandemic. I believe in touring. We can discuss it through many different lenses and perspectives around how it's going to harm the world or it's going to help the world in terms of ecology and so forth. But I still naively believe in the aspect of bringing different artistic expressions around the world is important. It's important for audiences. It's important for artists. And it is definitely a necessity still in contemporary dance, which I work in. It is a necessity for us to be able to perform until the time that we maybe have more local opportunities. We need to meet audiences in different parts of the world for sure still. So like Joseph said, the vulnerability of the structures can also then be turned into the strengths. How can we utilize the things we've learned through the pandemic and really take them further? I might be naively optimistic about the fact that of course we will get out of this, and I'm hoping that we can somehow eradicate the scare of the human intervention that has really blossomed during the pandemic. I think we want to eradicate the disease, but we also want to eradicate the scare of being together, and that I believe that we can do that through the arts and through touring.
eradicate the scare. I think you mentioned something that is really relevant at this point. There's a lot of fear, no, around what we do, around, I mean, Joseph, you were mentioning, we're incredibly interconnected, interdependent, but at the same time, there's a lot of fear around taking risks, moving forward, getting together again. And I would love to come back later on, Magnus, to how you're seeing the artist, the artistic production being changed or being defined by this moment. Thank you. Adrienne, would you like to share with us a little bit more about what you're doing, how you're going into this moment?
Sure. So I'm with Magnus. I might be naive as well, but I do think touring is still critical to our work. And especially coming through this pandemic, I think it has shown us how globally connected we are. For folks who, we all know that. We're committed to that. We're trying to bring those voices across borders. But, I think everyone in the world now can see that we are globally connected. And we are seeing from where I sit, we are working with artists from all over the world, and we do have many ensembles coming to the US, some very soon. We have 4 groups who are due to arrive here next month, if everything goes well. and with several more coming later in 22 and in 23. But we're also looking ahead to 24 and 25. And as we start to think about artists we want to work with, there are challenges around what they've been able to do for the past 2 years. You know, they have not been able to be with their fellow ensemble members. People have moved to all different parts of the world. You know, they have not had opportunities to perform it live necessarily. Touring has been very limited. So the work that's available and where people are at in their career, their artistic career, is shifting. And that's, you know, something we're looking at and thinking about, at least for the next couple of years. You know, how do we address that and support the artists to do what they want to be doing, and whilst also meeting our goals around cultural exchange. So that's very much on our minds as well.
Thank you, Adrian. I actually would like to ask you a little bit more about, you know, how, because the pandemic has changed so much in the past 2 years, no? But then suddenly you have the groups here coming in, and you're mentioning that the groups have of course gone through incredible challenges, and how specifically from your organization you're looking at how you should be adapting and helping them come into the US, organize a tour. But what are your concerns? What are you dealing with right now? How is that shaping the way you work?
Sure. So, you know, the health and safety of our artists and our staff that are on tour and the staff at the presenting organizations, you know, that's first and foremost in our minds, and figuring out all of those protocols as everyone is. And, you know, the challenges of taking a group throughout the US where we have different states, different communities, we have university presenters, we have independent presenters. So we have a lot of different protocols and rules and trying to keep up on that, but making sure our artists are safe is really the number one piece. I think the challenge for us, and it's partly about adjusting some of our thinking, is that one of the things we've seen with Center Stage is that a lot of the really wonderful exchange between artists and American communities are kind of the serendipitous moments. They are the things we don't plan for. It's the, you know, talking to the taxi driver, going to a concert of an artist who happens to be in town, talking to fans after a show. You know, we actually intentionally build in time so that those moments can happen. And that is a little more challenging now. You know, things will be much more structured. There will not be the same kind of opportunity for informal exchange. So I think, you know, some of our digital strategies are really great for the more formal kinds of exchanges. They're great for talks and classroom visits and things like that. But how do we get at those very small human to human interactions that are really what can create some meaningful change?
That's a real challenge, because spontaneity, I'm sorry, I'm losing the word, but is really hard right now. And you're right, it is a big part of what we do, and it's a big part of the connection. We'll go back to that again, thanks. Joseph, you're here with the artist perspective, and right. Listening to Adrian, you know, facing this question of how do we make, you know, the groups feel comfortable, feel at home, connect with the place they're at, with the audience. How is it for you, you know, as an artist, coming from a place in the world that's so far away? You're now in New York City, and you just shared you've had tremendous challenges through the pandemic. How do you want to bring some perspective, some reflection to what Adrian is saying?
I think change is always inevitable, whether positive or negative. But at the same time, it's how prepared are we for us to embrace that change, you know? So the pandemic has really hit us hard in a way that we never expected it. It came at a time that we were not prepared for it. But if the world changes, like, you know, we've all seen that a lot of things have really changed. We ought to change, you know. We have to find some strategies and ways into how we fit into the current, you know. So But at the same time, if we do not change, our principles and our values, our ideas cease to exist, you know. But we do not need to change to forget our values or who we are or what we believe in. We need to change to fulfill those values and keep our identity as artists, as communities, and also keep ourselves relevant. And so this change will enable us to think in new ways and to think outside the box, and also to see how we can open up new collaborative platforms and pathways and partnerships that could truly add value to the current way of life, you know, and maybe foster new models for inclusive but sustainable change. So that would be my brief reflection to it.
Absolutely. 2 years have gone by very quickly, but I'm sure we've found, has any of you found any of these new collaborative forms or models that Joseph is mentioning? I mean, it seems like it went by really quickly, but I'm sure that everyone's role and everyone's work has been transformed over and over again through these 2 years, at least from our experience. So this new way of collaborating that Joseph is mentioning, do any of you three have any example that you'd like to share of what you've been finding throughout this time? Sort of the aha moment that has, maybe just because we didn't have any other option, but that we've found new ways?
Yeah, I can share. I mean, one of our most beautiful partnerships that we have around one of our artist companies was actually formed by a chance meeting at this conference at ISPA between a dance ensemble and a music ensemble. I think that to take that as an example, we tried during the pandemic to actually deepen the relationships that we already had, and maybe not. We maybe went stepped a little bit back, not to try to find an abundance of new things to explore, but rather to deepen the things that we had in our international collaborations, which was very fruitful. We managed to make yet another collaboration, even though on a smaller scale, even though it was in the middle of the pandemic, so that was one way to go forward with it. I mean, we should not also acknowledge that working with dance in Sweden is of course can be very complicated, but it's also a very privileged country. We have funding. We've been helped by the state, and for those companies that could access that funding, they could continue to create. And I think that was also one way for us to go through it, to continue creating, and in the best way that we could, and then to deepen those relationships that we already had. Maybe not aiming to find an abundance of new partners at this time, but deepen those things that we had, and that felt like a sustainable way forward. Let's see if it's true or not.
Wow, it made us look more closely. I've heard a lot the phrase, you know, I instead of finding a new international partner, I found a new local partner, or I worked more with partners that we already have enough trust built through the years to make sure that even though we were away, that we probably couldn't get together and sit at a meeting or look at a project on the same, you know, from the same perspective. We already could sort of cash those time and energy that we'd put on those energies. You're mentioning two very interesting concepts: scale, you know, and depth, right? And I wonder if that's a way of looking at what this time has done to us. Do you think that we have looked more into growing smaller, or going that the pandemic has given us the opportunity to look further into the objective or the reason why we're doing things, instead of maybe, you know, the fast-paced, sometimes let's go bigger, let's go faster, let's go more impressive ways that usually we are, you know, sometimes. I don't know if that
I mean,
resonates.
I don't know about the why in that question, but I do think definitely that what I'm seeing is that those productions that were created during the pandemic were created at a bit of a slower pace, at a bit of more time, and a bit more focused. They were not as rushed as we usually produced our work. And I don't mean necessarily that they took longer time, but they were not as rushed. They maybe had more depth to them, and I am feeling in in the group of artists that we work with that those who created work and were privileged enough to be able to create work, they feel quite confident about the work that they created during the pandemic, and that they know that work quite well because they could work with it in somehow a more focused way. And I'm not sure why, I'm not sure how, but I think maybe it's because maybe they weren't gonna immediately be valued by many people at the same time. Maybe they could slowly take in reactions from audiences, etc., etc. I'm not sure that it's positive or negative, but it's just an observation that I think we're coming out with a few productions that we now really feel this should meet the world. And I think I didn't really necessarily feel that about many of our productions at the same time before the pandemic. So these are just some small observations about what's happened to the actual artwork and the actual process of creating art during the pandemic.
And as you say, let's see if it's a sustainable way of working, no, forward, which I think is a key concept or a key term for us to be thinking about, no, sustainability, and just, of course, from the perspective of climate change, and but also what is sustainable in the future, what kind of way of working moving forward we can imagine of continuing for many, many years. And I wonder, maybe Joseph or Adrienne, is there anything, it reminds me, of course, of the work you're doing, Joseph, in terms of climate change, but also in the way that Adrienne is working. So I don't know if you would like to reflect, maybe Joseph, if you can tell us a little bit more about your work with sustainability and performing, walk us a little bit on how you're doing that.
Yeah, so it's great. I also have to mention that while the pandemic was really, really bad to humanity, it presented us with incredible opportunities, obviously, and challenges. And the opportunities were very good, that we discovered new ways of reaching out to our audiences. We discovered new ways of connecting more with each other, even from a distance. The challenge is that we were so selfish enough to want the old life, the old way of doing things, being there in huge stadiums, thousands and hundreds of people in the audience. But then we realized that we can still do this from a distance. We can still do this digitally. So even in the post-pandemic era, we see us now as artists and producers and all the works that we do in the cultural and performing sector, embracing both the digital platform as well as the physical platform, where we could meet people where they are and be able to just move forward together. And when it comes to how we tackle the issue of climate change and sustainability, it's always about sharing stories, the stories we have and the experiences we've gone through, both positive and negative. It's the stories that really builds that human connections. Obviously, when we say stories, we expect stories of those at the front line of climate change. But then we could still have stories of those that have managed to tackle this crisis and how they've been doing it. So with that put in place together, we create an intersection that could really enhance our human connections and be able to think in new ways, be able to collectively tackle these deep challenges of our time. And we see music as artists as a powerful tool that has really galvanized and mobilized people to come together, meeting them where they are in the sense of their daily lives and values, and just be able to build empathy, to empathize with one another. And it has led us from turning on each other to like turning to each other. And we're optimistic that these last 19 to 24 months of the pandemic has connected us more as humans into now focusing on climate crisis or climate change, you know. So we are aware that there could be a next pandemic, there could be another great devastating challenge ahead of us. And so our work is just to ensure that we create that awareness, understanding of what they could practically do in their small ways or daily way of life. So yeah, that's how our role as the artist in music has been.
And the stories that get to be told, no? You're mentioning, listening to the stories of the people that are most affected by climate change.
Right.
Sometimes when we, in other parts of the world, are taking actions that affect, but aren't necessarily there to see like the entire process and the
Right.
results. No? And you know, that makes me think of sort of the ways we tour, or the ways we're used to tour internationally, and sort of the routes and the regions that that we see moving, you know, the artists around. And I wonder if we get to listen and see the stories that should be listened. I don't know if this moment where we stopped moving so much can give us a time or a possibility to start looking at other regions that have a lot to share and very important stories to be heard. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
I definitely think that from the Nordic region and the part of the world where I come from, as well as in all parts of the world, the voices of First Nations and Indigenous artists are crucial to disseminate in manners that they have not yet been. The audience around the world deserves to see these great works of contemporary work and older works that First Nation and Indigenous artists are creating. And there is a surge in the Nordic countries with really interesting new work coming out, and also work that's never been seen, because these companies and artists have not had the opportunities or been given the opportunities to perform. And I think this has been a discussion in the US and North America for a long time, and in many other different areas of the world. We're catching up to it now. I hope that we can all be, especially in dance, be part of this movement of creating movement of especially movement-based artists from the Indigenous and First Nations in the Nordic countries. So that is one sector or one voice, one group of voices that definitely deserves to be seen around the world.
And Adrian, in a way, that's what the National Endowment, that New England Foundation for the Arts looks at, no, and works towards.
Yes, that really is a big part of what we are trying to do and have been doing since the program started in 2012, is looking at what stories are told in the US, what do American communities, what do they have access to? You know, what are the arts experiences that are available to them? And we, especially for the first several years of the program, we're really bringing artists from either from countries that people were maybe not very familiar with or not very familiar with the culture of. You know, we've brought artists from Algeria and we've brought artists from Pakistan, but a lot of folks know some of the more traditional work, know the Qawwali singers. That is not who we brought from Pakistan. We brought indie rock bands and kind of folk singer-songwriters and some folks who sing and their lyrics are in English, you know, because there's a diversity of culture in every country. And the culture does not just stand still. And so, you know, we want to be able to highlight what is happening in the contemporary culture of that country as well, and have Americans experience that. And that's a big reason too why our tours do go to different cities throughout the US, and that the experiences that are available to folks in major cities like New York or LA or Chicago, Miami are very different. And we go to those places too. But, they're very different from what's available in like a rural town in New Hampshire or Iowa or Washington State, so just providing those opportunities for people to meet someone from another country that might be the only person from Morocco they ever meet in their life.
Yeah.
And so what is that story and that experience that they're having?
And
I do want to jump in on this.
Yes, please go.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
I really think there's a point here that Adrian is bringing also, that in terms of who should move and who has the right to move in the world right now. I mean, maybe that is also the thing. Maybe we should make sure that audiences in smaller cities in the world, especially in this country, Sweden as well, get to experience the contemporary experience where they are. And maybe this is turning something on the head of it. Maybe we should bring the most experimental works to smaller cities around the world. Maybe these audiences deserve not to have to travel to the larger cities to see experimental work. And maybe numbers can be turned on its head. Maybe an audience of if 300 people see an experimental work in a larger city, maybe it's fine if 30 see it in a small city. And then we have to look at money and look at the objectives of that. But any person in the world deserves to be able to see contemporary expressions where they are. And I think this could be the next question to really get into in our sector.
Who deserves, right? And why do we consider an audience not deserving? Is it because of the size? I mean, because Joseph, you do a lot of work with very small local community audiences, no?
Right. I mean, both small and large sometimes when I get to travel internationally.
Of course.
Yeah. But like Magnus has said, it's something that we need to look into now. You go to big cities, you expect thousands or hundreds of thousands in your audience. And then now we are looking into, you go to big cities, you only have 300, in the audience. You go to small cities, you only have like 30 people. Well, in the old perspective or old way of life, that's really weird. But the pandemic and probably the future challenges has taught us to be open-minded, to embrace new ways of doing things, not bringing the small communities to travel to larger cities, but just taking the maybe small concerts into where they are and just understanding that this is who we are here and we can always do it the way it is right now. So this is what I said, that the pandemic has taught us incredible lessons, to embrace new ways of doing things. So we have to be open-minded, a little bit ambitious without apologizing. Of course, we have to be ambitious to want things at a bigger scale, but at the same time, how are we moving sustainably? If we could put those on a high priority, then we expect the pandemic to be around maybe after 100 years or never at all. So yeah, and it's very critical that the arts, especially artists, get to really consider this as very core to our work in terms of tour, local concerts, and international touring.
Absolutely. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't represent specific challenges, no? Or different challenges.
There will always be challenges.
Of course.
And there will always be opportunities at the same time.
Yes, no, and I mean, why not? I mean, I don't know, but I'd love to hear about you, about taking those risks, no? Adrian, in a way, there's, I imagine, always a certain level of risk in bringing those ensembles, those groups to, rural communities, sometimes in a very broad spectrum of touring. After a couple of years, we've been really going much more local, no? As we were reading in the panel's description, there's more local agendas going on, and we've had 2 years of being really not much looking outside, and also maybe I would say this after a couple of cocktails we were having, Adrian, at some point, but after the past administration, that really maybe took a different took a toll in the way that maybe audiences are open to external contents. I don't know if there's anything how you're dealing with that. How is it coming along?
Yes, I mean, I think we're really fortunate that our government has continued to invest in this program even throughout the past 4 years. And, there's a lot of support for what we do within the State Department and within, other political spheres. I think there are a lot of folks who understand the value of cultural diplomacy, which is always really nice to hear for those of us that kind of do it in our jobs, and we already know that and see that. I think a big part of what we also are trying to do sort of goes back to something Magnus was saying earlier, which is, the relationships that are developed are also the relationships and the partnerships are also key to this work. So, that's part of our strategy. I should have said this earlier around these upcoming tours that are starting soon, is that we're working with partners for the most part that we've worked with before. Mm-hmm. And so we can have really honest, hard conversations. We can change together because change is inevitable. We're planning for things and we don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 weeks, but we have folks with us. We trust them. They trust us. We can work together to find solutions and find ways to make it work for everyone. And that really is our approach with every community. We're not looking to just kind of put the artists in a community. When we do, these tours are booked like tours get booked, but we do take sort of a different lens, which is that we look at presenters and say, how would you host someone in your community? What does it mean to be a host? And we often say, like, if you had friends or family come to town, what would you do to host them? And those are the experiences we're looking to provide. Yes, there's all the things, this is the stage they need and the tech they need and all of that, but what is the experience of hosting? And what we are looking for really are good hosts. And that really is the critical piece for us. And then developing those relationships, and we have presenters we have worked with over and over because we now trust each other, and we all kind of are on the same page around the goals of these programs.
And that has been before the pandemic and ongoing. No, that is not necessarily something that will change. It's just something that we need to keep looking at as we develop tours and as we continue programming in the future.
Yes, I think it's becoming more and more important to what we're doing. It's always been our approach, but I think moving further and further away from relationships that are purely transactional. Is where we're headed. We want to be in relationship and in conversation with presenters, with community hosts. I mean, we work with a lot of kind of presenters that are not typical presenters. And that's okay too, because they may not actually know anything about like how to rent the right equipment and staging and all of that. And that's fine. We will bring our knowledge and our expertise. What they know is their community. And how to bring those artists into that community in a way that is also comfortable for the artists. So I think we are just going to go deeper on all of our relationships, and that is part of our change and how to move forward.
There's decisions to be made. No, we get to travel with less people, with less freight, etc. So. Being more clear about the reason why, what we're aiming for, is key. I agree. And what do you think we should be thinking about in terms of finding a sustainable way to continue touring in the future? From your different perspectives, what should we be looking at? How do we make this continue to happen?
I definitely think that we are aiming at, I think we fail a lot so that we're aiming at talking about a view on the pieces we create on being sustainable in terms of the tech rider, in terms of the things that we ask for from a presenter, what we bring, etc., that we really try to maybe focus more on on bringing the people rather than the material, the etc. In manners that we can without compromising the richness of artistic ideas. So this is a conundrum, of course, and it's a hard way to solve, but we try to at least talk about it in various manners and make radical choices that we didn't do before. We will make choices about set design, about costumes, etc., that we didn't necessarily do 10 years ago. On the other hand, I think that you posted this question before the panel as well, how sort of, how we should think about it, and about sustainable touring. It is a very hard question, but I do think one simple thing, and it has nothing to do with the pandemic, is that we need to really think about cohesive tour planning, whatever that is. From a non-presenter side, it feels old school to talk about exclusivity. I hope that we can eradicate that as well. I think that audiences will not move as much, so I think you can perform pieces an hour away from each other. We're not that well known. People won't maybe travel for us, so maybe we can lose a little bit of that, and then do some more cohesive planning around touring, however that's going to be done, and maybe that's a topic in itself. But for sure. And whilst I think that, of course, more artists need to be shown and travel, we need a multitude of voices to be brought around the world. We also need those things, those pieces that we bring to a certain area of the world to not just perform one or two times. Hopefully we can continue working and collaborating on making that less, making those just guest performances, singular guest performances, happen less, and more tours going on. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Go ahead.
Just to agree with what Magnus said, it's really a tough question or a tough approach. But at the same time, while there might not be an equation or a silver bullet to approach it, there could be a silver backshot that could really help us navigate through these uncertain maybe parts that we are yet to learn more and understand more and see how best we can apply that knowledge and understanding. But at the same time, I would like to think like that it's okay to dream big. It's okay to believe. As an optimist, I still think we can still have huge festivals, huge concerts where people can still travel, people can still come together and have it the old way, but in a more amplified and sustainable way, This really, if we could draw the lessons of what worked before the pandemic, and what lessons can we get from what did not work, and maybe see how we can develop new ways and strategies on how we could do it. I am optimistic that, yes, we have this digital platform, right, where people can access concerts and content and everything, but at the same time, we can still travel, we can still go to those favorite festivals and concerts, and we're social animals. I would like to think, as humans, we're social animals, and we blend well. Here we are, just feeling so differently after 24 months. You're like, oh my God, I'm in here. So yeah, it's okay to dream big and to be optimistic that one way or the other, we will triumph. We will win the fight against climate action, climate change, and we'll win the fight against this COVID-19. And moving forward, we'll move sustainably, making sure that we are open to ensure that we don't go back, we don't find ourselves to what we've been through before.
Absolutely.
And I think, if I can add to that,
Please.
There has been the opportunity now to do things differently and to ask ourselves questions about why we do things the way we do.
Right.
And I think about that as we designed our process for how we select artists and taking trips to each country, and we sort of designed that because that's just what you do way back in 2010. So now is an opportunity to reflect on whether that still makes sense. And I think in some cases, I know for me, there are certain cases where the answer is yes, that actually does make sense. We've made it work virtually because we've had to, but it's not the ideal scenario. But we know that now. Like it's much more. We can be much more intentional about what can happen without travel and what really benefits from being on the ground somewhere, and kind of what you don't get if you don't do that piece, rather than just kind of being like, oh yeah, that's how this needs to happen. I think we can all be much clearer about where and when and why we go somewhere.
Do you think, maybe this will be our last question before we open it up to the audience, do you think that in 1 or maybe 2 or 3 years, what would be the trend? Where will we be looking at in terms of international collaboration? Thinking about yesterday, and the future, the Future Institute. What do you think we'll be doing in 2 or 3 years differently?
Having realized, like I shared in my opening remarks, to say we are incredibly interconnected and interdependent on one another. I see us embracing partnerships and collaboration at a greater scale than before, and ensuring that we collaborate in as much areas and sectors as possible. I just think it's time now to move from unilateral approach to multilateral approach, and I'm very optimistic that this will be achieved successfully with greater lessons. Obviously, we expect challenges ahead of us, but we would have prepared ourselves and built some slight capacity to tackle the challenges that will come before us 2 or 3 years from now.
Way more collaborative.
Way more collaborative.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Magnus?
Yeah, for sure. I agree with Joseph. More collaboration. I think that's the way forward. Thinking together, thinking out loud, and thinking together about how we can solve these issues that we've discussed today. Artist to artist collaborations on an international level. I think that's going to be an upcoming and growing trend. Companies working together, and which I think many beautiful collaborations now are based on, which also makes artists have more bases than just one country they can utilize. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to go all around the world, but they can also utilize and find more bases where they can deepen their relationships. And I believe we will find some ways to also make it more sustainable if we tend to put our brains together. I mean, the performing arts is also an amazing array of thinking people, and I think that we will find a way to do it. And I still believe in the fact that it is a radical thing to bring people around the world and put them in front of other people, living people in front of living people. I think it's kind of a weird thing to do it. It's a radical thing, and it's a magical thing to do.
Yes.
And people might have many questions around it, but it's also a way of opposing political movements in the world who wants to eradicate movement of people. And even if we might think that it's for a small audience or for a limited number of people, there is still something in the action of saying that people should move around the world. It is this might sound very religious or holistic, but I still believe that if we put our brains together, we can keep this going, keep this important way of showing the humane side of the humans by putting them in front of each other in this manner is something that we still should do in the future.
Absolutely. Adrienne?
And I feel like I can't predict 6 weeks or 6 months out. So, I have no idea, but I am also very hopeful for more collaboration. And also in everything Magnus and Joseph said, and I would add to and include the sharing of knowledge and ideas and resources and even within our sphere, who's in the conversation. You know, I think we're probably all in this space today because we inherently understand the value of culture and cultural exchange and crossing borders. And where are the folks in our field who aren't in this conversation? How do we bring them in? You know, how do we share resources, knowledge, you know, things we've learned when we have traveled? What did we learn? How do we share that with our peers? You know, that is what I would love and hope to see as we continue moving forward.
A culture of generosity, no? Amongst us.
And empathy.
Absolutely. Agreed. Thank you so much. I wonder if our audience members here at BAM, or maybe at home eventually, want to ask, share experiences, share your thoughts, how you are dealing, facing the situation, or ask any questions to our panelists. There are some, thank you. Yes. And if you can please say your name and where you're coming from.
Hello, I'm Max Wagner from Munich. Just a little idea that came to my mind to make this bad conscience that we have when we think about our companies traveling around the world a little smaller. I read that the big companies, industrial companies like Siemens, like I know the German ones, they made a big surplus the last years because they found out that their people don't have to travel anymore. They make all the business now online. So all these planes are empty now, no? Of all these businessmen flying around the world. So I think artists should take this place. And perhaps even these companies should pay for us taking these planes.
There's a thought. Thank you, Max. Yes, what do you think? Magnus, is that an idea over there?
I don't know, just to respond, I don't know if it's to react to that. Yes, he's right. They need to really see that we are recognized. I don't know if we need to be paid as much as we would want to. But the pandemic has really shown the world, especially the world leaders, what the culture and arts can do, especially in times when the world is faced with incredible uncertainty and dark times. It's the artists, it's the performers that really looked after the world when everybody didn't know what to do. When there was despair, we were out there risking. Essentially, we are also a part of the essential workers, you know, essential community because of the role that we played. But I'll let Magnus and Adrian maybe just share something quick. Yeah.
No, I agree, and I also think that this could be a discussion. How should multinational companies, should they in the danger of collaborating with such companies as well, but how should they be part of, or how should they take responsibility? And maybe that is, like Max said, a way. Maybe we should fill all those empty seats with artists. I mean, it's a radical idea, but it's not an impossible idea. You know, it's a manageable idea, which are things we need. We need those manageable ideas, and that is actually a very practical solution. I don't know what you say, Adrian, but
well, I think I would say that working across sectors is something we have always excelled at in the arts. And so what are the opportunities for that in this changed world? And how do we, and maybe it goes back to what I was saying earlier, you know, how do we have conversations not just with ourselves? Yeah. And crossing into other sectors can be a way to do that. And maybe that comes with some resources too, that would be nice. But as you said, also some danger with that at times as well.
Yes, and it requires us to organize, just like Max was saying yesterday, you know, being a better organized community when we actually go out there and ask for something. And that requires that kind of conversation and generosity, I agree. Anyone else would like to ask something? Yes, please.
Hi, Dave Moutry from home in Manchester. I'm probably going to say something which is heresy in this place, but I don't see how touring's collaboration. It's moving big shows around the world or around a country, but it's not collaboration. It's on a superficial level it is, in terms of, you know, getting things around, etc. And that Magnus touched on something earlier about making work, about artists collaborating to make work. And I think that, you know, we touch on climate change here. We aren't going to fix climate change by having electric trucks moving stuff around. We need to change the paradigm and the way in which we make work. And actually true collaboration, cross-border collaboration, and real value propositions where artists get together from different parts of the world and make work locally. That's a true value proposition, I would suggest. And I think that maybe the future is that sort of thing which Magnus was talking about. Rather than filling planes up with people, it's actually moving individual artists around to collaborate with other artists in places to make very specific work.
Would you like to reflect on that? Yes.
Yeah, I think that one simple thing that we've chosen to do, and that's also part of the reason that I'm not in New York, is maybe that I'm going to ask my artists to travel a bit more than I did. I traveled for many years, and I think that if we get to travel again, we will make those priorities. I will definitely travel, but we will make priorities. So maybe the artist goes before me rather than I go before them. That's kind of shifting it a little bit. So I agree with this thinking as well.
Adrian, is that something that you, I mean, beyond bringing in the groups, making the artists work together as a way of joining the cultures, is that something?
I mean, that's a lot of the artists we work with are hungry for opportunities to collaborate with other artists. And that is often the case in the countries that are the most isolated. So, you know, their ability to connect, and especially some very small countries where, you know, so just in terms of numbers, there just aren't a lot of people. It's not, you know, countries that are not as large and diverse as the US. So I think, but I also think that every artist is different, and what they're looking to do is what they're looking to do. And we, you know, that needs to be supported. It's not, I wouldn't want to put that on an artist unless that is something they're interested in. And I think, to just respond to the idea of touring not being collaboration, I think that absolutely can be true. And I think there are places it can be collaboration. And I think what some of us are talking about is trying to shift more towards collaboration and not just making it about, you know, oh, I booked this show on this date and now it's going here. I actually do see opportunities for tours to be true collaborations between partners.
Yeah, and making more of a singular date in a singular place. You know, workshops, talks, deepening that experience. I think that's all things that were discussed before the pandemic, but now can definitely be taken care of properly, possibly.
Yes, please.
Hi, Maria Hansen with Elia. I've been really passionate about this topic, as some of you know, and the question about touring is a really complicated one. I've started to follow this sort of motto, follow the money, and there's a lot of money in touring, and I think the kind of touring that you were talking about, perhaps, Magnus, there's not a lot of money in that, I suspect. But for many players in our sector, the business model depends on the touring, and it would be complicated. And I'm really wondering, how does one break that model? It's not just the money; it's the visibility, the reputation. Not actually getting playing dates in your own country unless you have an international reputation, and so on and so on. I think the cultural diplomacy and peacemaking that artists can achieve is completely true. I think that's completely true for small groups, and maybe even more so for small groups that stay a bit longer than for large groups that come for one day, playing perhaps the same repertoire that they've been playing for the centuries. And so I'm wondering, what does this need? Does it need a few of the big players making big statements, like I think Coldplay was trying to do? Does it take a large famous orchestra saying, we will not tour anymore? And we have found a partner, corporate partner, government partner that will support that. And we're now going to play in our own country, or whatever, or we're only taking the train anymore. What does it take? Does it take one of these big ones or a few of these big ones to start breaking the mold?
Yeah, I can respond. I think definitely it is important that to make those statements, and I think some festivals in Europe are doing that by saying that we will bring pieces to our festival, but we will only do it in this manner, by boat or by train, in the way that they can. That is a statement, and I agree, Maria, that those or I acknowledge that those statements could be important. However, maybe it needs to be looked at which of those models are the most sustainable models, and so forth and so forth. I don't know, Adrian, do you have any of those statements in your organization yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think we are working with the small artists, and we're not dealing with these big tours and or symphonies. But I do think, I think those with the most resources should be leveraging those resources on behalf of others. I think this is sort of the culture of generosity that came up before. Recognizing, everyone needs to recognize what power they hold within this field and what can they have an impact on. And maybe it's not the big symphony saying we're not touring anymore, or we're not international touring, but saying we're not going to show up for one date. Like, you have to keep us in your community longer than that, or we're going to do other things. Like, what is it about the model that can shift? And I do think there needs to be, there often that change will happen more quickly if there are those kind of the biggest, the most resourced also kind of take that stand.
Yeah.
And I guess just to add on to that, Adrian, I don't know, also, the programmers, the venues themselves, and in a way the audiences, to start asking for that, to start expecting when an international artist is in town to have a way more engagement than just like a flash star coming and going, but asking for master classes, expecting that and hoping for that, and also shifting the market in that sense. In a way, there's someone else over there. Yes, please.
Hello, this is Reem. I come from Egypt. Actually, I just wanted to comment that this whole discourse about lowering travel and being low carbon is actually a discourse, like if you come to the Arab region, is something very alien, because they are already being low carbon before that, like before the discussion, because of course they don't get the same rights in terms of visas to travel, and also the economic conditions doesn't allow them to travel. So it's the opposite. Like now they're trying to travel more, to expose their work more. So I feel maybe instead of just asking ourselves whether we should travel or not, maybe we should ask who should travel more, who should travel less. I also think, since the topic is about collaboration, maybe it's not the artists that should pay the price for the environment and what's going on. Maybe also the venues, the programmers could collaborate more, because I always feel that festivals sometimes have like this urge to be exclusive, and they want to be the only venue or the only festival that presents an artist. But this is more of the ego speaking. So maybe more if venues in different countries collaborate, then an artist could travel to several countries in one tour and save the carbon. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And yeah, I'll jump in. I think I can't agree more. And I think that one of the I wrote a little bit of a note on this before the panel is that especially in my field in contemporary dance, most artists work on their own completely without a team. So supporting the sort of knowledge around an artist, supporting the middle hand, supporting production, supporting the ability for artists to have support as a team can also make it more easy for artists to not just jump on any single opportunity, for them to think more thoroughly about how to organize their tours, etc. It takes a lot of time, and it shouldn't just be on the artist's responsibility. And if it should be on the artist's responsibility, we need to push resources towards the artist so they can have a proper team around them, a professional team. I would say 9 out of 10 in small scale contemporary dance artists they're working on their own completely, and that goes possibly in experimental theater and dance and music as well, of course. So rethinking about where we can put resources in terms of structures is also important to create sustainable models for further yeah encounters between artists and audiences.
I believe we have another question there. Yes.
Catherine McVicker from Music Works International. I wanted to make one comment and ask one question. I work primarily with jazz artists and world music artists and Americana artists. And with the collapse of the record industry, most artists that I work with have to tour because it's the only way they make money. They don't make money from working in studios anymore or from selling records. So that's one thing that I think is a reality. The other thing I wanted to ask as a question is no one has said anything about all of the video content that has been online since people couldn't tour. And I was wondering, in my view, I don't think that's going away. I think that's going to kind of be here to stay. But on the other hand, it's very hard to make money from that for the artist or for the presenter because people are so saturated with watching stuff on a little tiny screen. So I was wondering if any of you would address the technology that kind of came up as a result of the pandemic.
The one thing I am thinking about with all of this is that I agree the technology is not going away. I also don't think it's necessarily going to replace anything. It feels a little to me like a moment however many years ago when social media started and there were a lot of folks who were like, great, we don't have to do marketing anymore. We'll just do social media. No, it's just now you do the social media marketing on top of all your traditional methods. And my sense is that the online content is going to be the same way. It is going to be in addition to what happens in the live space. And, the combination of fully virtual, live streamed, hybrid, fully in person, available after the show, all of that. I think all of those things will continue. I think your question about how to monetize online content is the big question. I think that's the question our whole field is struggling with. And the revenue models that exist in our field just don't work with the online content. So how do we reconcile that? And I have no answers, but I think that is one of our big questions and challenges moving forward.
Yes, there's someone there in the back, please.
Hi, I'm Adam Hafiz. Hello, everybody. Thank you for this panel, and so happy to see Magnus, even if it's on a screen. Very quickly to tie into the question that was just asked, how to think of the future of digital content and how would artists monetize it. For us, we started working on the blockchain for that reason and working with what is called non-fungible tokens or NFTs and smart contracts. And I'm more than happy, I'll be hanging around here today and tomorrow. Anyone who has a question about what that is and how to incorporate it in their institutions, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. But I just wanted to share with you my probably not very popular opinion. I'm all for sustainability, but I get so scared when I hear of the potential of us having our work curtailed and fettered by sustainability as a massive, larger policy or political project. And it reminds me of things that we just take for granted and accept, like Lufthansa, the German airline, 2 days ago admitted that it has been flying 18,000 empty planes since the pandemic to just keep the flight routes. 18,000 empty planes. So I would want to ask them why they were doing this before someone would ask me that I should stop touring my dance productions, because I certainly have never flown 18,000 planes full or empty, and probably won't with our company. So there's a sense of scale that scares me, because it also reminds me March 2020 when everything shut down, and bars and restaurants and theaters, and then theaters were the last to open. And bars and restaurants opened, and people were told that it is safer to sit and scream across a loud bar, but it's not safe to sit with social isolation, with a mask on your face, watching a dance that is happening, 10 meters away. And I fear, because we in the arts care, or at least we try to perform care towards one another, I fear that sustainability, as I said, I'm all for it, but I fear that it could paralyze us, and it could really stop us from touring and from seeing each other, and that we would, as someone said, that we would be paying the price for Jeff Bezos going to space and for Bill Gates taking a private jet alone every single time he has a meeting. So, I don't know. I'm just sharing my fear so that when they tell us we are not allowed to travel with our work, we tell them, no, they're not allowed to do what they're doing. So, thank you.
I think we have time for one last question.
Sorry, I don't know.
Yes.
Is it okay? Can I ask over here? Hi, I'm Linda Brumbach from Pomegranate Arts. Thank you so much. I'm glad you said that, because I've been thinking a lot about the impact of our field moving around the globe as opposed to the large corporations, and to get a perspective on that as we think about moving forward. But one point I want to bring forward when we're thinking about, hi Magnus, we're thinking about hosting and caring for artists now, moving around. Because it's a very heavy lift for our artists now to start again and move around the globe the way they were moving. And I feel like the film and TV industry has worked really hard to make this easy for their artists and performers and crews. And we have a lot of work to do in our field when the artists start moving around, to make tests available easier, thinking about how they're eating, how they're traveling, because I don't think it should be on the artists. They have a heavy lift. So I think we need to think about this particular time in history and how we provide that service and hosting and care for the artists when they arrive in our city, so they don't have to wait online for tests, they don't have to think about it. It should be there for them. So I just want to bring this up as a thought to move around, because there's a shift I think that the field needs to think about that other industries have been doing and we have not yet. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Well, thank you very much. Guys, would you like to share any final thought? I think we're ready to wrap up. To what Lynn mentioned. Yes, please, Joseph.
Thanks to your questions and contributions. Obviously, that's why we're here to share ideas and thoughts on how we could move forward. But I would also like to think and agree with my friends and colleagues to say the pandemic has instilled a lot of fear in us and made us quite vulnerable. But at the same time, I would also like to make mention that it's this same vulnerability and the fear that we have that will bring us together, that will make us realize that we are more alike than we are different, and that time for a lone ranger is long gone. We need to collaborate across sectors with the academic, the scientists, and everybody, and the artists brought together in one room, then be able to respond like the way they've put up questions or reactions on Jeff Bezos and the likes of Bill Gates. We would like some of them to be here and share their ideas and everything, but just quickly, again, wrapping up, is that we have to believe in the power of human connections, in the power of conversations, stories, experiences, as well as embrace the idea that it's through those connections that we can see hope and that we can find sustainable solutions. Right at this moment, we don't know exactly the equation we need to use to move forward. What we are doing here is just sharing stories and educating ourselves what are our gaps, what are our opportunities, and what are our challenges, and how do we move forward. So yes, let's get on with our curiosity and let it be our drive in how we work with our work. Yeah.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you so much. Thank you, Magnus. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you so much for everyone in the audience, and we'll see everyone tomorrow. Thanks.